appreciation to President and Chairman of Council for this opportunity. So we dive straight into the business of the day. And I want to make some very quick remarks as we open this conversation. So much has been said by several speakers yesterday and this morning about the envisaged transformation of the Nigerian economy, how that can be achieved, and of course the pivotal role of corporate governance in that process. Now we'll put this in context for the panelists, and I believe also our speaker certainly will dive into this as well. And that is, how do we change the game? That is, how do we grow our economy responsibly and in three perspectives? One, to grow it inclusively, and then grow it sustainably, and grow it also in a sustained manner. Now, in achieving that, the question for us will be, how do we, in the course of these three major thematic areas, agriculture, solid minerals, blue economy, achieve the resolution of the major macroeconomic challenges we face? So in the light of our topic of the day, transformation. Yes, we have the African farmer here who will talk to agriculture, apart from the overview by our speaker. Then solid minerals, Tony will address that. Of course, blue economy, we listen to Femi Awoyemi, who did a recording. And of course, right here is NIMASA at the very heart of the blue economy. So without taking further time, our speaker, because of the time limitation we have, if you can do your presentation in 15 minutes, we'll be so happy with that. Yes, please, you can take the podium. Thank you so very much.
Good morning, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor to address you today on a topic of paramount importance to our nation's economic progress, the role of corporate governance in driving Nigeria's economic transformation and diversification, specifically from the perspective of agriculture as a driver to national economic transformation. As a nation blessed with abundant natural resources and a vibrant workforce, we possess immense potential for growth and development. However, to unlock this potential and steer our economy towards sustainable growth, it is imperative to recognize the pivotal role that corporate governance plays in this journey. Coming down to agriculture, the National Bureau of Statistics indicates that as at the second quarter of this year, the agricultural sector, while employing about 70% of rural populace, contributed only about 21% to Nigeria's GDP. This actually is less than this same time last year. To improve productivity in the agricultural sector, purposeful action is required. It calls for innovative and pragmatic policies and concerted effort towards effective funding, integration of technology, and delivery of seamless corporate governance practices that will enhance food security, foster economic stability, strengthen the entire agricultural value chain, support job creation, and empower our low-income farmers, and indeed the large-scale ones too. In October of last year, in the government's bid to bridge certain infrastructural and funding aspects of agriculture, the National Agricultural Development Fund Establishment Act was enacted. The fund is mandated to provide 9 broad aspects, which essentially to provide finance to support agricultural development in Nigeria, provide finance for the implementation of agricultural policies and strengthen agricultural institutions within the framework of national priorities and strategies. The third function is to provide funds for all lending to farmers and corporate bodies through financial institutions. The fourth is provide finance primarily for the establishment of special agricultural office in each state of the federation to boost food production systems in Nigeria. The fifth is to provide financial support in the form of grant for research, training, market information systems, agricultural extension service in research institutes, universities, and MDAs. The sixth is to provide emergency fund for agricultural finance and intervention for the control of transboundary animal disease outbreak. The seventh is to participate in the effort to build rural access to financial service through microfinance by creating linkages between upstream financial centers and local organizations. The other is to assist the efforts of donor institutions to increase food and agricultural production as well as the organization's technical and competence in this field. The last function, as defined in the Act, is to engage in such activities and perform such functions as this Act may confer, or as the President may, after consultation with the Minister of Agric, permit or assign to the fund. I assumed office as the Executive Secretary and the CEO of the fund last week, and in our quest to discharge the above-mentioned functions of the fund, we are in the process of engaging reputable consultants to develop, along with our team, a long-term strategy document infused with corporate governance principles, the principles of accountability, transparency, stakeholder engagements, ethical behavior of all involved, board and board implementation committees' responsibilities and effectiveness, risk mitigation, monitoring, internal control, and oversight. These are the broad areas that we want to have infused in our strategy document. We believe that when governance structures are robust, it encourages efficient resource allocation, it mitigates risks, it boosts investor confidence, and ensures ethical business conduct. In the few days that I've been in office and with my background in the agri-tech space, I have seen nothing but opportunities within this sector, real opportunities that need to be harnessed by you, corporate Nigeria. I believe that the integration of technology in agriculture has become a game changer in this country. Leveraging innovations such as precision farming, IoT devices, mobile applications, mechanization, and data analytics can revolutionize agricultural practices, leading to increased productivity and sustainable farming methods. Of course, to fully harness this potential, a strong governance framework is indispensable. This will ensure ethical use of data and promotion of responsible innovation that benefits all stakeholders. In the recent years, agri-tech companies, again, I will speak about agri-tech, in Nigeria with strong governance practices have been able to attract foreign investment, mostly from VCs and PEs. This is a vote of confidence to the potential of the sector. It may also mean, or it may also be an indication that our local investors are probably missing out on the growth of this sector, which is definitely a key driver of economic transformation. I remember the many funding rounds that have happened within this industry last year. Companies like Hello Tractor raised about $1 million, Vandees $3.2 million, Relief $4.2 million, AgriCorp about $17 million, Thrive Agri over $50 million, just to mention a few. If we come back to the new role I'm playing on the public sector side, we have seen MDAs like the NSIA, the MOFI, Ministry of Finance Incorporated, and the BPE, amongst others, that have shown how institutions of corporate governance can make, how instituting corporate governance can make public sector agencies thrive. For our economy to grow, we need to improve foreign exchange inflow in the short and long term through attracting foreign investment, whether portfolio investment to our capital markets or direct investment to companies like the aforementioned. I believe, and you probably will agree with me, that potential outcomes of economic transformation and diversification through agriculture will birth so many pluses, including increased GDP production, employment opportunities and inclusion, foreign exchange earnings, food security, rural development and poverty alleviation, industrialization and value addition, and environmental sustainability. I call on corporate Nigeria to pay more attention to the prospects in the agriculture space. There's so much going on a global and on a Pan-African scale. The African Development Bank is playing a positive role in promoting agriculture in Africa. At the core of this transformation, the bank is working with governments and the private sector in 11 African countries to create special agro-industrial processing zones that will turn the rural landscape into economic zones of prosperity, while harnessing the power of commercial agriculture and food production. The AFDB and the key development partners are co-financing the first phase of the SAPZ in Nigeria to the tune of about $500 million. The SAPZ model, a vision articulated by the African Development Bank President Dr. Adedipe Adesina, was developed as the bank's solution to rural agricultural transformation across the continent. When you add the opportunities in the SAPZ and that of the African Continental Free Trade Area, a free trade area that has the potential to be one of the world's largest by population, with an estimated of 1.7 billion people, and of course economic size with estimates of about $7 trillion by 2030, you will agree with me that entrenching corporate governance in our institutions will be the catalyst for turning Nigeria into the agro-processing hub of the continent. Of course, collaboration between government, development organizations, private sector entities, and regulatory bodies is essential to establish and enforce robust corporate governance standards. This partnership is pivotal in creating an enabling environment that fosters innovation, ensures compliance, and drives sustainable growth across all sectors. As stakeholders in Nigeria's economic prosperity, it is our collective responsibility to advocate for and uphold sound corporate governance practices. By doing so, we pave the way for increased investment, technological advancement, and inclusive growth, ultimately contributing to the diversification and transformation of Nigeria's economy. In conclusion, the role of corporate governance cannot be overstated. It is the cornerstone upon which sustainable growth and development in these sectors rest. Let us commit ourselves to embrace and promote a culture of transparency, accountability, and responsible leadership to unlock the full potential of Nigeria's capabilities to drive our nation's economic transformation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much. That was very well within the time. And of course, the important points were made. I won't repeat or summarize what you said, but dive straight into the conversation on agriculture. So my first question will go to African farmer, because that is your space. We know what agriculture was in the 60s and the 70s in Nigeria. We are also aware of the feeble attempts made in the mid-1980s to revamp agriculture. Of course, the solid state it was in the early 2000s. Now, in the third decade of this century, and that's the way I want to put it, our population continues to grow. It is useful. It is tech savvy. And of course, you can see in the presentation just made now by our speaker. Now, growing numbers also residing in urban areas. Putting all of this together, what transformation hope can we put in agriculture?
Thank you. First and foremost is for the private sector to have an understanding that they have to influence the public sector. We leave agriculture for government, and it's a business. And the private sector is the sector that runs business. So every time government brings out a policy, the policy does not align with business principles. So that always makes agriculture not work. The first thing is policy. Policy and policy. Government policy is the biggest challenge. I say government policy somersault. The only constant thing in agribusiness, I've been there for over 30 years, the only constant thing is that policy must somersault. Must. Every 4.5 years, it must change. So if we have policy that does not somersault, then you can plan. However, we can plan also within that. And two is, we need the private sector, and I'm happy this is IOD, to also understand that over 50% of salaries of what will keep you sustainable goes to agriculture, feeding. 50% of the salaries you pay go to feeding. So we need private sector organizations now to begin to focus on how to get the system to pay attention to feeding of staffs. I don't mean feeding during the work. I mean feeding the way you pay attention to talents. Is the way you need to find systems on how each organization can have a cooperative where they are able to buy food cheaper. And also talent challenges. The challenges in agriculture is not Japa to Europe or US. The current challenge is Japa to urban centers. Japa to Abuja, Japa to Lagos, Japa to Port Harcourt. We are also having that challenge, and we need to understand that having policies and systems, taking away manual labor is very crucial. All interventions since 1999 has been focused on manual labor, give fertilizer, instead of small and medium mechanization. Until we mechanize, we cannot increase productivity. So bottom line is, we need small equipment like India, China, Indonesia that have adopted, and that policy of driving mechanization and not subsidies and co. That is when we can have food security. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. I think that sets the tone properly. I will come back to you on the agri question. But let me move over to Tony with respect to solid minerals. They exist all over Nigeria. Good number of them occurring in commercial quantities. And indeed, the commercial values in mind are really mind-boggling figures. There are also references to illegal activities in that space that have security implications. A friend of mine said, if you map the insecurity occurrences and where the illegal mining activities are taking place in Nigeria, there seems to be a very high correlation. So now, from your perspective, what is missing and what must we get right for solid minerals to become a tool for transforming the Nigerian economy?
Thank you, Dr. Adedipe, for the question. For sake of time, I'll just go straight to the direct answer. So Section 19 of the Mineral and Mining Act of 2007 makes provision for something called the Mineral Resources and Environmental Management Committee. Now, this committee has a clear mandate to harmonize the relationship between the federal government, the state government, the local government, and host communities on an ad hoc basis. However, what we see on ground is that this committee is either non-existent or is a tool for state governors to reward supporters, more or less. That's what I can call it. And therefore, you find out that in a lot of the states, you have just one federal mines officer having to monitor over, sometimes, in Kaduna State, for example, there's 562 valid mineral titles today. And you have one man who's supposed to go to all of these remote locations. We don't know what kind of equipment he has. We don't know what kind of vehicle he has. We don't know if he has any kind of support. So what you find is that it leaves room for foreigners to go into the hinterlands against the provisions of the act. You have a lot of Chinese here. We want to ask questions like, how come we don't know what's going on with expatriate quota? That's Nigerian Immigration Service. So who's giving all the Chinese expat? Because the law is that unless you cannot find a Nigerian who has the same skill set, you don't bring in a foreigner. You talked about banditry. That's a very dicey one, because in part of the work, consulting work we are currently doing for the legislature, two things have popped up. The first thing that popped up is the fact that there's always conflict who signs community consent. So the consent form clearly states paramount ruler, village head, and community head. But we find out that in the cadastral office, there's issues of petitions between two companies, and the consent was signed from people from the same community. Now, that sets the tone for conflict. In fact, I have to bring out one issue just for an example as I wrap up. In Nasarawa State, when we were having engagements with the State Board of Internal Revenue Service, because unfortunately, the SBIRS in every state does not make anything like payee from the mining sector. They're like ghosts. They're only in the bush. They have no office. Well, they have an office when they're registering to get the license, but there's really no one there. And so what happens is they just appear in the community, wreak havoc, put a lot of money in the hands of the locals. And then the state government is at a loss as to why there's so much problems and insecurity. A lot of young people are being, given humongous amounts of money by foreigners. And I think that a lot more attention needs to be paid into the governance issues around mining. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. In fact, that is the second question I intend to raise with all the panelists. But before we go into that, I want to just say this about the blue economy, because most of us are really not aware what blue economy really is. Somebody said, is it painting the economy with blue color? Or what exactly is it about? Now, it is that part of the economy that is focused on sustainable use of the nation's oceans and other bodies of water. It also includes things like fishing, tourism, shipping, and renewable energy. But it is all about economic processes and inclusion that speak to the need to reform political, social, and economic governance practices. And I put this also in this context. Nigeria is ripe to consider the blue economy for the basic reasons of: one, we have 853 kilometers of coastline and also 200 nautical miles of exclusive economic zone. That alone translates into about 290 square kilometers, or 1/3 of the landmass of the entire country. So that gives immediately an idea of the kind of potential we have within that space. So the question for us, according to the Minister of Marine and Blue Economy, who announced the goal of generating $20 billion annually from the blue economy, while creating 2 million jobs each year. So now that brings the connection to one of the major challenges macroeconomically that we have, unemployment. So if we can create 2 million jobs from that blue economy annually and generate $20 billion annually, that talks about the potentials. How does this come together? Let me come to you, sir, Mr. Isichei.
Thank you very much, moderator. Let me just say that I probably don't have a job here if you have somebody like this moderator. He has finished answering all the questions. So my job is just to sit here and respond and say I concur with him. Thank you. But I just want to send the apologies of my DG, Dr. Bashir Yusuf Jamu, who is presently on a mission, an international mission marketing the Nigerian blue economy in faraway Mauritius. He would have really loved to be here because there couldn't have been a better quality audience of Nigerians to speak than directors from all over the spheres of the private and public sector. Thank you. So I equally want to appreciate the President for the foresight of really knowing that you need to do the walking, not just the talking, by ensuring that the right policies are put on ground to get us running by, for the first time, creating the Ministry of Marine and Blue Economy. And picking the right person to do that, a very ambitious, private sector-minded person who, yes, in spite of his current status as an elder statesman, belongs to the Gen Zs in terms of thought. And so, who is driving the blue economy. So, like I said earlier, the potentials are there. He's virtually reeled it off. What is clear is that before now, what we've always had is what we call the sea blindness. Sorry, it's not a sickness, it's not related to river blindness, which is a disease. This is physically, a metaphorical way of expressing our long absence in the maritime space. It is there. Just like the maritime postulation of the Minister of Marine and Blue Economy, that we can generate $2 billion, $20 billion from that sector. I can just, in a few seconds, tell you how possible that is. Far away Philippines, when I used to visit there many years ago, they generate annually $6 billion just from proper banking remittances from seafarers. Seafarers. Who are seafarers? They're just young men and women out there manning vessels all over the world. Philippines is surrounded by water. It's an island, a lot of multiple islands in water. What did they do? They just decided to harness their environment and decided to send their own youth out there to just get the requisite qualifications to man marine vessels. At the end of it all, they send them out. They are snapped up by the very big maritime firms all over, and shipping firms all over the world. When you check, just Google, if you see a vessel coming to a country, they're either Filipinos or Chinese. They are not magical. If you check amongst us here, very many of us don't even think our children or relations should be in that business. What I tell you is a business that is 100% denominated in dollars. So we are getting a few from our diasporas everywhere. But can you imagine if we send a lot of youths? That is the legitimate japa, because they are not japaring out of the country for good to just go away. They go, they come in. They are probably 1 month onshore, 1 month offshore, and they earn quality income. It's just a snippet of what it could be. But without taking us too long so that others could speak and we'll come back, there are other many areas. We do very little or nothing in tourism. Very little or nothing. You need to go to Ghana, you need to go to Togo. If you don't go by the bad roads, then just like the senators will tell you, there are no roads to go there. So they have to buy vehicles that will take them there. This time around, there's a business. You don't even need the road. We can put vessels there. Tourism. I will be glad to do a 1-week tour from here to Banjul and back on just a little, fund that you put. A lot of Nigerians will do it. Tourism is a very big one. In this country, some of us used to leave the south to Sokoto just to go and see the MS Palace or the Sultan's Palace. We used to do it. We go to Yankari. These days, insecurity, we don't do them. In maritime, the tourism is there all over the world. All of us, or let me say, a good number of us live here. We go to Malta. I've been there. You go to Bahamas. What are you going to do in Bahamas and Malta? Is it not you just want to have a feel by vessels? Those things are here. If our system is good and is created, your takeoff point can be Lagos. Takeoff point can be Warri or Port Harcourt. So there are a lot more that can be done. Not to say the least, fisheries. How many of us know that the fish or whatever they sell to you and package in the UK or somewhere in the Bahamas come from just behind your waters here? They just come from here. What have we done? So the government is trying to put in place policies that will help us to seek investment and harness these resources just right behind us here. And with that, you can better the Nigerian economy. Thank you for now. I'll be back.
So very much for that. Thank you. In fact, the statement you made reminded me of a remark that one of the companies operating here in Nigeria shared with me a few months ago, that the best catfish in the world is actually from Nigeria. Same thing goes with shrimps. And this company makes a lot of money producing and exporting them. So I also understand that Mr. Femi Awoyemi has like a few minutes video recording. Can we take that as his contribution to the conversation on the blue economy? And then we now take the last round of questions and come to the audience. Can play that back, please.
Good morning, colleagues and delegates. Nigeria's attempt to diversify its economy and reduce the vulnerability to external shocks is rightfully considered with the promotion of other viable sectors such as agriculture, solid minerals, and the blue economy. The sector selected appears deliberate by government, but the necessary policies, programs, and projects to drive the thoughts to actions are still at large. Our blue economy currently lacks aggregated data. However, this ecosystem covers transportation, fisheries, power, with basically renewable energy, hospitality and tourism, climate change, and waste management. So what are the key issues around the blue economy? I will look at three from our personal analysis. First is the political challenges. The absence of coastal states' control over their natural water resources and coastlines significantly impedes the efficient management of the nation's waterways. An indication of this conflict is the ongoing litigations between Lagos State Inland Waterways and the Federal Inland Waterway Services over control of waterway revenues in Lagos State. The problem over who controls inland waterways revenue has been a long-drawn battle since the early 2000s, and it shows an innate conflict between federal and state governments over resource control. This lack of broad political consensus but the nature of the Nigeria's fiscal federalism has deep economic implications, including making the blue economy a fragile concept. A second aspect of it is the economic hurdles we have to go through. A blue economy will require competitive and efficient use of coastline resources. The Nigerian ports and maritime facilities are currently costlier than neighboring countries such as Port Novo in Benin Republic or Tema Port in Ghana. The relative high cost of Nigerian ports has reduced port activities, which in turn has reduced potential employment and decreased tax revenues that could be achieved in a less expensive and more efficient administrative environment. The high explicit and implicit cost of using Nigerian ports has stifled growth of maritime activities and held down the expansion of Nigerian coastal economies. The shrinking of port patronage is evident from the reduction in ships that have battered in Nigeria over the years. The third point, and more importantly, is the social implications. The high incidence of piracy, smuggling, human trafficking, and drug peddling makes Nigeria's maritime business a precarious entrepreneurial activity. The high presence or influence of wharf gangs has equally created a marine inverse ecosystem that is socially precarious, involving illegal guns, drugs, prostitution, and gambling. The rough social life at the Marines has infiltrated surrounding villages or communities with young girls precariously introduced to rough social conditions and young boys recruited into a lifestyle outside the law. The consequences of the antisocial subculture have been in dire places like Ajegunle, Apapa, and Ijora in Lagos State, Abalama, Tombia, Degema, and Buguma in Rivers State, the Creek Town and Calabar in Cross River State, and similar challenges exist in riverine communities of Ondo, Ogun, Bayelsa, and Ebonyi states. There are other issues within the process, like the technological inefficiencies, the environmental concerns, and the legal complexities. However, having said all this, there are some policy actions we believe that the Nigerian government needs to do to aggregate the economic transformation agenda. One is that the fiscal arrangement in Nigeria needs to be revisited in such a way as to allow states to have greater autonomy over their local marine resources. This will enable littoral states to generate the private capital investments needed to improve the capital of marine ecosystems and expand the blue local economies in sustainable manners. Two, there needs to be greater fiscal autonomy for littoral states, which may appear radical, the thought may appear radical, but if the country is to achieve the greater growth in the blue economy, centralization of policy and investment at the federal level cannot bring about any fast-paced improvement in the maritime sector anytime soon. The third point, the sector must witness greater privatization of infrastructure and deeper localization of economic activities. These littoral states' marine fronts should be treated as the equivalent of the crude oil, and maritime states should be entitled to derivation proceeds from revenues at the ports. This will bolster littoral state revenue and serve as an incentive for such states to improve infrastructure leading to the ports and terminal, since they would have a higher vested economic interest by way of increased revenues. Fourth point, the principles applied to the blue economy will also be equitable applied to the green economy, which must have been discussed earlier, where agricultural output will also be given similar treatment. This approach proposed, it looks at the blue economy from a basics that there must be some form of constitutional review, therefore, which will therefore help if we have the political buy-in from all parts of the country. So we have our work cut out for us. Lastly, this current administration has created a ministry for that purpose. That is good. But it is imperative for us to have a national maritime strategy that brings together all facets of the blue economy and set the course for sustainable use of the country's social resources. Most importantly, all these plans, strategy, must be incorporated in the National Development Plan, or at least the 2024 to 2026 medium-term expenditure framework and the fiscal strategy paper at a minimum. Let me conclude that the potential for Nigeria's blue economy is so huge.
Thank you very much, Mr. Femi Awoyemi. Now, our dear panelists, our speaker, we have only 5 minutes here. So, and I want you to take it from this perspective. How do we strike a collaboration between the public sector and the private sector in the intersection of corporate governance in this transformation we are talking about? So I know you made reference to productivity in agriculture, both as speaker and African farmer. So, but can you just, in 1.5 minutes, say something about this? Okay.
I think taking up from what Africanfarmer has mentioned, policy. Those policies have to be right and also replete with governance practices. From my perspective, from what our fund is trying to achieve, we also want to see that those policies are in place in terms of everything. So funding, for instance, I would say that looking at it bottom up, one of the major challenges of funding that has brought about room for little abuse is probably on identity management. Who is the real farmer? Who is the political farmer? Who is the middleman farmer? So those things, if we get things like that, in terms of probably public sector funded projects in the agri sector, technology is important, most especially looking at M&E tools. How do we effectively monitor whatever projects we're doing? How do we evaluate results? What impact are we getting? And so on and so forth, all replete with proper governance and policy from the onset. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Africanfarmer?
Thank you. While I was chairman at the Lagos Chamber of Commerce, I introduced the policy we call Eat Local. So we introduced taking gari and kuli during formal meetings, taking boiled corn, anything local, anything locally produced. Now, having an understanding that one, policy, implementing local policy that is adaptable works for everybody, ensures sustainability, economic development. If everybody here, every organization represented here, brings a policy out to say, in our meetings, we're going to be eating local, that helps. When we begin to do that, then we get government and give direction to government. Government is always waiting for private sector, but private sector almost never takes that lead. When we do that, government listens to us and they pay attention to the private sector. I strongly believe that Murphy, has a very strong influence in that with the BOI, where policies that drive BOI, part of it will focus on small scale incubation. In India, there's incubation everywhere funded by government. So policy of BOI needs to say a percentage of the funding needs to go for incubation, which can grow and eventually become members of IOD. So private sector takes the lead, public sector would align. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. Isichei, with respect to the blue economy.
Thank you very much. I will just take it from where he stopped. Already I was scared that it's 3-1, 3 private sector against me. I must thank the Institute of Directors for giving government the space to also speak. I think government this time is taking the lead. The private sector is 1-0 down already. Government is leading by setting up the Ministry of Marine and Blue Economy. So you can see that we need to do our own. If we go by the old saying that if you don't buy the lottery ticket, you won't win the lottery. So if we don't go into that space, maritime space now, we won't take the advantage. Other great nations have taken the advantage long ago. We, on this side of the maritime industry, used to say that that's the famous thing. The greatest nations on earth are maritime nations. There's no great nation that is not a maritime nation. Name it. From the US, a lot of water around them. Russia, India, China, name them. Why are we different? We need to take the advantage. And the maritime space, the blue economy space, begins from water. We're only saying that's the takeoff point. So in whatever sphere of business that you are, if it's logistic, there's a lot to play. A lot of landlocked countries around Nigeria, whether you are talking about Niger, Chad, and all that, why will they take their goods from Ghana or Cameroon? Why don't you use our ports? If they do, why don't we have the right rail or logistic avenue to move things? Then you go to the other aspect of it, which is human resources. Very, very huge. Government had long taken the initiative. In NIMASA, over the years, we've come up with what we call the NSDP program, the Nigerian Seafarers Development Program, where we have trained already about 2,500 of our youth. Guess what? They barely find a space to work in Nigeria. You know why? Because they are snapped up by shipping firms all over the world. We are still saying that is a cost. So many of us here never bother to encourage our children or our youth to go into. You need the same qualifications you need for engineering, to do marine engineering, architecture, whatever part of the business you want to do, that is in that. There's also the inland waterway, like he mentioned earlier, the moderator. Categorically, you have about 10,000 kilometers of navigable waterways. What are we doing with the possible investment opportunities there? So from Steve Doran, where you need to get people to hire to do, or is it bunkering? Please, when we say bunkering is not an illegal thing. It's a legitimate business. It's not about taking fuel and all that. In shipping business, bunkering means providing goods and services for vessels who are coming from all over the world to be able to sustain themselves when they come to Nigeria. When you also look at that aspect of the business, what are we doing? When you come to oil and gas, our shipping companies are not doing much. All the oil companies, whether it's Shell or otherwise, do you know what? All the vessels that service them all probably come from outside the country. You can get charter businesses. You don't even have to own the vessels. You have to start from somewhere. The journey of 1,000 miles starts with a footstep. Like the parable goes
that is
locally.
The message.
Yeah.
That there are investment opportunities.
Vast investment
that
opportunities.
space.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much. So
Thank
let me come to Tony now. Thank you so very much.
Corporate governance as it connects to the solid mineral sector is a bit of a challenge to dimension that, because 95% of mining in Nigeria is artisanal. So you have subsistence miners like you have subsistence farmers. And these people migrate during the rainy season, they are farmers. During the dry season, they are miners. They have no care for the environment. So it's difficult to put such people under a corporate governance bracket. However, I think the most important things that are happening now is that the Solid Mineral Development Fund by law is supposed to formalize some of these cooperatives by providing financial support. I would say this though, some of the things that need to happen in the solid mineral sector immediately is to block leakages. The leakages are phenomenal. They are worse than anywhere else and in any other sector. So a lot of us here, I'll just drop this as an example, a lot of us hear about what's going on with lithium in Nigeria. No one really understands it, but we have Chinese companies doing 40 trucks a week. I didn't say 40 trucks in a month, in a week. And we have them having multiple locations, 15, 17 locations across one state. Niger State, heavily loaded with them. Nasarawa State, heavily loaded with them. Benue State, heavily loaded with them. So what must be done? I think the most important suggestion regarding incentivizing corporate governance to be instituted in mining companies is by providing what is their biggest problem, which is funding. We have too many speculators who hold licenses in Nigeria, exploration licenses with no funding and no plan, hoping someone will snap it up. Well, how do you solve this problem? You provide means, adequate means to finance. Now, banks, they keep inviting banks to conferences. Banks can't fund mining. They have short-term funding. They don't have long-term funding. So what needs to be happening is there has to be further engagement with the Securities and Exchange Commission. There's something in the law, the Investment and Securities Act, called the Collective Investment Scheme. And that provides a subset where you can have specialized funds. The challenge with that is we cannot find the expertise to write, like, with SEC, you need to have an investment memorandum. Yeah, so you cannot cut and paste that from a Canadian jurisdiction or Australia. You have to customize it. SEC needs to see that you've customized it to your local market. And that talent, I'm glad we started with talent. That talent is not really here. So I think that in terms of connecting governance, corporate governance to mining and incentivizing it, the first thing that needs to be looked into is how the Securities and Exchange Commission can get involved. When people need money, we'll find out that they follow the rules. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. And in fact, that is very, very fundamental. And also we could pick that from the presentation by our speaker, that good corporate governance give opportunity to agri-techs to access funds that, of course, had enabled them to also develop within that space. So we have time only for 2 questions. I will take one from this side of the hall and another one from this side. And then we wrap up this session. So thank you so very much. Any either question or comment? One from this side, okay. 2 hands up, let me take one. So you will speak for the 2 of you. Maybe you ask him what he has in mind, so you can speak for the 2 of you.
What do you have in mind?
All right.
Okay.
Okay, because they are sitting together, that's why
All right, thank you. My name is Dr. Nikki Okoye, and most of the folks here are old colleagues. I have a comment, and I think the comment might stimulate a question. We talked about mining and agriculture in excessive deep senses. One of the issues that I have with our people here in Nigeria and across the African continent is that we don't do enough to prepare ourselves for the opportunities that we have in our economy. I'll give you a typical example. In Germany, at secondary school level, 12, 13, 14-year-olds, there is a subject on mining that young German children are learning about mining, but they don't have mines in Germany for the most part. Most of those mines are in Africa. Everything I learned about agriculture, for instance, I learned it long after my schooling days. There is no course in secondary school or in university, except you're studying agriculture, that teaches us about these resources that we have in our country and across the continent. It's not just a problem with Nigeria, it's across the African continent. So we're not preparing ourselves for our own resources. We talk about the new generation, where the economy is going in terms of electric vehicles and alternative fuel, but all that is going to depend on lithium-ion batteries, which is in abundance in Nigeria and in Congo or in Angola. So how come we're not preparing for this economy? It's incredible. And I think that if any of the panelists can address this, do we need to take specific look at the curriculums again so that we can prepare if we have lost this generation? Let's say we have lost this generation, but let's not lose the generation coming after us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm sure one of the panelists will respond to that. Any question from this? Okay, your hand is up.
I'm Sholai Fremoluwanuga. I'm a lawyer, governing council member. I would like to ask a question relating to what one of the speakers spoke about, how we can actually leverage on our coast and how we can leverage on tourism. And the question that comes to mind is that, is government not provoking, like Macbeth would say, provoking the desire for taking away the performance. Because when you look at security, go to the coast. If you go to Eleko Beach or thereabout, you see some young ones on the beach, and sometimes you are afraid. But you go to other countries, things that do not really matter much. I was in Paris a few weeks ago. You see them put a boat by the Eiffel Tower. They put a boat ride on it, and then you ride on that boat. They tell you some things that you see by the side of the boat, and then they turn around and turn back, almost 20,000 naira. You know, and yet we have something in Nigeria that we can actually sell, but you can't get there. So I think, yes, blue economy, yes, we've been stimulated about what we can make from it, but there are fundamentals which I think we need to get right. Then finally, on the other thing about SEC, I think we need to explore, discuss with SEC, that is my area, crowdfunding for mining. Mining is something that we need, like you have said, we have not scratched the surface. So if we understand it more, and it's an engagement I love to have, and it's an engagement I think SEC should be called into, you know, so that we can have an integrated approach and ensure that this something is really being mined. But it's good discussion to keep having. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. It seems to me that both interventions are more of comments than questions. So unless Tony has anything to say to that, because, yeah, that first comment by Nicholas.
Okay, so the first thing about, I think the comment made about the curriculum. So let's break it down very, very quickly. In secondary school, there are certain courses you do that would expose you to the chemistry of mineralization. You know, it's just the periodic table. Minerals is the periodic table, from hydrogen straight to lead. I mean, if you know the periodic table and you understand stoichiometry in chemistry, a lot of it is easier to understand. That's one. As you leave secondary school and go into university, we have certain schools that offer mining engineering courses. But will Nigerians go through the route of exploration to mine plan and design? Maybe not likely. Maybe BUA for limestone, maybe Dangote, who have to operate above board, but they make up the 2%. So in answer to your question, we do have the curriculum. There's the Nigerian Institute of Mining and Geosciences, but let me just answer straight the solution. We do not have any mineral reporting code in sub-Saharan Africa. Now, what does this mean? No matter the fund you raise for mining projects, you must bring an Australian or a Canadian to endorse your report.
Yeah, that's it.
And now you have the Council of Mining Engineers and Geoscientists having over 4,000 members who are not credible enough to get you a bankable report. Where's the motivation there? Sometimes they are more brilliant than the Canadians and the Australians, but they cannot stamp the same report that they did 90% of the work on. Now, what's the solution to that? CRISCO. It's Committee for Mineral Resources and Standards Organization. So what CRISCO does is CRISCO has a template for mineral reporting. Any country that's going to be a member of CRISCO, it means that you are following the template. The last country to register was India last year. Why is Nigeria not a member? Maybe people in the Ministry of Mines and Steel can answer. Oh, sorry, there's no mines and steel anymore. There's solid mineral development, and then there's steel development. So maybe the Minister of Steel, Solid Mineral Development will be able to answer why having the World Bank as your neighbor. Because the World Bank's office is right behind the Ministry of Solid Minerals. So how come they don't know that you have 4,000 COMEG members who can't get jobs? Because no one is going to take their report to any bank, any financial institution. It will generate zero kobo. So this is a fundamental problem that once you have our COMEG members able to do exploration programs that you can take to the venture exchange. You keep talking about Segilola. Everywhere in the world we go as Nigeria is one project, Segilola. How? It's simply because Segilola got funding from TOR, which is the Toronto Venture Exchange. We have a Nigerian commodity exchange. What's going on with that? So fundamentally, the Ministry of Solid Mineral Development, the Ministry of industry, trade, and investment have to step up. Because our NCX, let me just leave it at that.
Thank you so very much. Final
Thank
word.
you. On the blue, because he mentioned.
Just
Okay, quick
a
one.
minute.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, Dr. Adedipe. I know we're in a haste to go, but that's the problem of over syllabus. I was told to prepare a paper. I didn't know it's going to be a discussion.
All right.
So
Okay, just 1 minute.
I will just take it from the first question, which is very clear. It has to start from the curriculum. It has to. And you rightly said it. We don't even have the prerequisite environment for that. So most of our seafarers, as I speak to you, are trained. In short, the 2,500 are trained outside this country. We spend so much in terms of foreign exchange, and that's why we're trying to localize it, beginning from the pioneering of the Nigerian Maritime University. As I speak to you, we also have the Maritime Academy, and I know if there are people here who own universities, check 99% of them don't even have any marine course on their curriculum. So we need to start from that stage. Like I said, as I speak to you, I have countries writing us. Gambia, Marad, have written us to say they need our support to train their people locally. So it starts from there. You are right. So government and the private sector could do something. Then he said something beautiful. Some of us have been to Paris, so he spoke to what all of us know. They collect all those 20 euros from us, and it pains me when you convert it. You know how much they collect for just strolling around the water to look at the tire field. That is a typical example of the huge potentials you have in the maritime sector. Because we don't have time, I know and I trust IOD. They will do justice to this. There will probably have to be a full day session to really discuss details about the potentials in the blue economy. And I'm sure when that is done, we'll all know that is an Eldorado waiting for us to tap in. Ghana is already an oil-producing country, so don't say you are the only oil-producing country. We need to look elsewhere. And like they also say in the Nigerian parlance, it is when you wake up that your day starts. In the marine economy, business, clear-cut blue economy, our day has just started with this government. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you. There's a school of oceanography in Lagos that needs more investment to be able to get the students. It's a Federal College of Freshwater Fisheries in Niger and Oceanography, where we can learn a lot about the blue economy. But I'd like to just drop something as we go. And it spoke about the next generation. Many of us are not aware that the next challenge that is going to be very predominant in Nigeria is antibiotics resistance, mostly found in the fish and chicken that we'll be eating. And also, this is very alarming. If you Google it, you'll find out that most of the male children, the next generation, our grandchildren and children, will be faced with fertility challenges because of the hormones being fed. Most of the imported chicken, they feed them female hormones, which is translated into the young males now. So please Google it. So we know that we have a lot to do beyond just producing food. We need to produce the right type of food. After governance, after corporate governance, is the family. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Final word?
Yes. My final word would be, of course, we've spoken about a few opportunities, but as we all know, there are also threats. One of the biggest threats facing our country now is about food security. Hence, the renaming of the Federal Ministry of Agriculture to Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security. And that is why it is imperative for corporate Nigeria, for IOD, for big-time investors to come. I'd like to leave with a question to ask, which is, I would like to ask, how feasible is it for a nation to tie its food security to smallholder farmers? Thank you.
Thank you so very much. At this point, we wrap up the session and say a very big thank you to the panelists, including our friend Femi Awoyemi, who sent in.
Sorry, Mr. Moderator, if we could take 1 minute to look at somebody that just sent in something online, just for a few minutes, so that we can close this session with that. Just that.
The biggest threat to agricultural production in the country today is farmer security. It has reduced production in some states by up to 50%. The financial support plan of the governmental institutions most often are consumed by the middlemen, not the farmers. How can our institutions correct the situations for the agricultural producers? Now, I think there was a reference to that in your presentation. And but I don't know whether I want to speak to that.
He can speak to that for 1 minute.
All right.
Again, I think looking at food security, there are a lot of elements that constitute why we have this issue of food security, where we are becoming food insecure. It's not only the security challenges, but also the environmental challenges. If you take it across all aspects of agriculture, whether it's in the livestock or in the crop production, security is paramount. Most of our farming lands are seriously insecure, but then we are not looking at the other issues, which is the environmental, the socio-political, and even the vulnerability to our farmers of certain indices that are not looked at from a micro state in Nigeria. Technology, again, may be the watchword. I've spoken about farmer identity, where we need to have a proper identity management concept for all the products and programs we do for farmers. Thank you.
I think we wrap it up at this stage. Central to the issue of security when it comes to agriculture is the place of technology. And there's so much that we can do if we explore that space, and especially also looking at agri-tech as a new dimension to agriculture. Now, clearly, from our conversations here, if the government comes with the right policies, and of course, the private sector also collaborates by being the leaders, we should be able to get this economy transformed within a short period of time, looking at these three key sectors: solid minerals, agriculture, where food is available and affordable, and of course, the blue economy, which is quite humongous in terms of the opportunities. So I want to say a very big thank you to our President and Chairman of Council and the Governing Council of the Institute for having us here as a team to address this issue of transformation of the Nigerian economy. Thank you so very much. And panelists, God bless you all more and more. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much indeed.